The atmosphere on the set of Good Morning America was electric from the moment Meghan Markle stepped onto the stage. Dressed in an elegant yet understated outfit, she carried herself with her usual grace and calm demeanor. The audience, well aware of the anticipation surrounding her rare live appearance, was buzzing. George Stephanopoulos welcomed her with a warm smile, clearly prepared for an engaging conversation. Initially, everything appeared to be going smoothly, with pleasantries exchanged and compliments passed back and forth. Meghan spoke about her new podcast, her philanthropic endeavors, and even cracked a light joke about adjusting to American life after her royal years. George nodded and laughed along, but as the minutes progressed, the tone of the interview began to shift. He leaned forward, his expression slightly sterner, and said, "Now Meghan, let's talk about some of the controversies that have surrounded you recently." Her smile faltered slightly, but she nodded, "Sure, let's address them." The audience quieted, sensing the change in energy, and the stage was set for what would soon spiral into an unexpected confrontation that no one could have predicted. George began by referencing the ongoing tensions between Meghan and the British royal family, a topic she had grown weary of addressing. "Some believe that your interviews and public statements have caused unnecessary strain within the royal family. What would you say to critics who claim you've used your platform to air private grievances?" Meghan paused for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "I think transparency matters. Telling the truth about my lived experience isn't about throwing anyone under the bus, it's about standing up for myself and for others who feel silenced," she replied. But George wasn't satisfied. "But when you say, your truth, doesn't that suggest subjectivity? The palace has denied several of the claims made, and some viewers might feel they're getting only one side of the story." Meghan's eyes narrowed just a touch. "There's a difference between denying something and disproving it. I spoke up because I had to," she said firmly. The tension was palpable now. George leaned in further, "So you believe the monarchy failed you?" The audience held its breath. Meghan exhaled slowly, visibly trying to remain composed. "I believe there were failures, yes. But this isn't about blame, it's about accountability." George, sensing the opening, didn't let up. "You say you want accountability, but how do you square that with signing multi-million-dollar media deals and producing content that some argue fuels division rather than healing?" Meghan's smile vanished. "I've worked hard for every opportunity I've earned post-royal life. I didn't choose to step down from duties lightly, but I did choose to reclaim my voice," she replied, her voice low but controlled. George countered quickly, "Yet critics argue you've capitalized on that decision to build a brand based on controversy." Meghan raised her eyebrows. "Do we call it capitalizing when others write books or produce documentaries? Or is that label only reserved for women who speak out?" Her tone had sharpened. George, momentarily taken aback, blinked before responding, "I'm not questioning your right to speak out, Meghan. I'm asking whether you feel that the attention you've received has sometimes overshadowed your causes." Meghan leaned forward slightly. "If there's a spotlight on me, I'll use it to talk about mental health, women's rights, and equality. That's never been about attention, it's about impact." The audience clapped, but there was an unmistakable undercurrent of discomfort. The clash escalated as George pivoted to Meghan's recent legal challenges and tabloid lawsuits. "Some of your legal battles have painted you as combative, even litigious. Do you worry that perception affects your public image?" Meghan's posture stiffened. "Defending yourself against illegal breaches of privacy shouldn't be framed as combative. It should be recognized as a right," she shot back. George tilted his head. "Still, the number of legal actions seems unprecedented for a public figure. Do you think that maybe the media scrutiny is a result of how public you've made your own life?" Meghan's eyes flashed. "So let me get this straight, you're saying I deserve to have my letters published without consent or be harassed online because I've chosen to work in the public eye?" George lifted his hands. "I'm saying the more visible someone becomes, the more they attract attention, positive and negative." Meghan leaned back, biting her lip before replying. "And when that attention crosses into abuse or lies, people should fight back. Silence isn't nobility, it's complicity." The room grew quiet again, the kind of silence that comes before a storm. Meghan's calm was cracking, and George, perhaps unintentionally, kept pressing forward. Trying a different angle, George brought up Meghan's relationships within Hollywood. "You've been seen with influential media figures, and some say you're working to align yourself with elite power players. Is that a fair characterization? Meghan chuckled humorlessly. I align myself with people who are doing meaningful work. If someone has a platform and uses it for good, I'll support that. George nodded, then said, yet your critics say that by associating with celebrities, you've become what you once criticized, a product of the media machine. Meghan's expression tightened. I never criticized visibility, I criticized being exploited by it. George wasn't done. Even now, there's speculation about whether your public appearances are calculated. Meghan snapped back, so when I attend charity events or support a friend's project, it's calculation. Maybe consider its commitment. The air thickened. The back and forth no longer resembled a typical interview, it was a verbal chess match with no signs of slowing down. The tension was magnetic, holding everyone's attention in a kind of collective hypnosis. George's attempts at pressing for clarity were beginning to feel like jabs, and Meghan's patience was visibly wearing thin. When George brought up Prince Harry, Meghan's composure showed its first real crack. There are rumors that even Harry is uncomfortable with how public things have become. Some suggest he's more reserved, and this openness clashes with his instincts. Meghan blinked slowly. Harry and I are partners. We discuss everything, and we support each other fully. He's his own man, and no rumor can define our marriage. George countered, but doesn't it concern you that your critics often portray him as being dragged along? Meghan leaned forward, her voice icy. Harry is not a prop. He's a former soldier, a humanitarian, a father, and a husband. Anyone who reduces him to a caricature isn't interested in the truth. George pushed again, and yet, the question remains, why the need to be so public, so frequently? Meghan shot back, because we were silenced for years. You can't expect someone who's found their voice to then whisper. The audience erupted in a mix of applause and murmurs. George glanced at the producers off camera, possibly questioning whether to continue on this trajectory, but Meghan was already shifting in her seat, clearly growing frustrated with the tone of the conversation. George then referenced recent polling data suggesting Meghan and Harry's popularity had declined in both the UK and US. How do you respond to the public perception that has shifted away from support? Meghan let out a controlled breath. Public opinion is shaped by narratives. And for years, many media outlets have chosen a narrative that paints us as villains instead of human beings. George nodded thoughtfully. But doesn't that imply people are incapable of making up their own minds? Meghan responded sharply, it implies that when you feed people half-truths and distortions long enough, they forget to question them. George tried to lighten the tone. Some might say that's exactly why interviews like this are important. Meghan tilted her head, eyes narrowing. And yet, this feels less like an interview and more like an interrogation. The audience gasped quietly at the tension. George cleared his throat. I assure you, Meghan, we're just asking the questions that many people want answers to. She gave a tight smile. Sometimes it's not the question, but the intent behind it, that matters. I attend charity events or support a friend's project, it's calculation. Maybe consider its commitment. The air thickened. The back and forth no longer resembled a typical interview, it was a verbal chess match with no signs of slowing down. The tension was magnetic, holding everyone's attention in a kind of collective hypnosis. George's attempts at pressing for clarity were beginning to feel like jabs, and Meghan's patience was visibly wearing thin. She crossed one leg over the other, a subtle sign that she was grounding herself, anchoring her energy amidst a sea of provocation. The studio lights seemed hotter, harsher. George, sensing the shift, tried to pivot the conversation slightly, asking her how she balances motherhood with public life. Meghan's voice softened for a moment. My children ground me. No matter what the headlines say, when I'm with them, I'm just, mommy. That's what matters. It was a humanizing answer, but the reprieve was brief. George followed up immediately, and yet you still choose to be public-facing. Some ask, why not retreat into privacy completely? Meghan inhaled sharply. Because disappearing is what they want. Being silenced is what they expect. I refuse to disappear just because it makes others more comfortable. Her words were sharp-edged, and a few in the audience murmured in agreement. George blinked, then pressed again, but is there a point where advocacy becomes overexposure? Meghan leaned in slightly, her voice steady but intense. There's a difference between sharing and being stripped bare. I share what I choose. That's control. That's power reclaimed. The line struck a chord, resonating with viewers in the studio and, undoubtedly, those watching live. Meghan adjusted the microphone pin to her collar and gave George a long look that clearly communicated her resolve. He paused for a beat, then said, "Fair enough. But I think we also have to consider the public's right to question public figures." Meghan replied immediately, "Questioning is fair. Dismissing, dehumanizing, or distorting, that's not questioning. That's a campaign." The word, campaign, hung in the air like smoke, suggesting a level of coordination to the criticism she faced. George shifted in his seat. "You believe there's been an orchestrated effort against you?" Meghan answered without hesitation. "Yes, absolutely. And not just against me, against women who dare to be vocal, women of color who refuse to be boxed in." Her voice had risen slightly, not in anger but in conviction. The audience responded with a smattering of applause, but the tension didn't break. George, clearly sensing the volatility of the moment, paused longer before his next question, perhaps weighing whether to push further or change course. Meghan, meanwhile, stared ahead with calm defiance, no longer simply participating in an interview, she was making a stand. What was supposed to be a promotional appearance had become a televised tug of war over reputation, autonomy, and truth. The cameras kept rolling.